Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another weekend of me, Monica Guzman, coming to you very late, wherever you might be. This weekend, I want to start touching on the opioid epidemic that has gripped America since the late 1990s. That's when the medical community actually started to take note of what was happening in emergency rooms. And so I've divided it up into two segments for the weekend. So today I'm just giving an overview of the origin. And then tomorrow I'm actually going to get into some statistics. I checked the CDC website and it actually hasn't updated its information. I mean, it's very easy to assume that the opioid statistics have taken a back seat to the lockdowns and to everything else that's going on right now. But that doesn't mean that the opioid epidemic has died down. So I'm going to bring in a couple of different perspectives into this because a lot of what we're living through in America in 2021 is the result of things that have happened to the country, as opposed to Americans bringing it onto themselves. Again, if you want to go back into American history, all the way back to the Pilgrims. So Americans figured out how to thrive on this soil for a solid 300 years. So we'll go from 1630 to 1930. For 300 years, Americans figured out how to thrive in this country, how to build, how to care for the soil, how to grow their own food, how to build, how to barter, how to build an economy. And did this without the internet. They did this without phones. They did this without cars for a long time. They did it without any of the modern conveniences of today. And it's really important to think about these things, because a lot of people right now are trapped in this line of thinking that they can't get anything done if they're disconnected from the internet, if they're banned from social media, if they can't fly, if they can't get a bank account. So while all of these things are obviously inconvenient and extremely sketchy, you've got to remember that Americans waged and won the American Revolutionary War with horses and pamphlets and meetings, secret meetings that were being held away from the British. And I'm going to keep encouraging you to think back to those days when Americans got things done. And Americans were more intelligent back then. They were healthier back then. They were more resourceful back then because they were living by their wits. So a lot of things are happening to Americans, are being forced on Americans. And 2021 is the result of decades of 1% of the population teaming up with 12% of the population, and just they have never stopped backing their agenda. They have never stopped supporting to their agenda. I'm not sure how it works. If this 1% of the population passes it down from one generation to another, or if it's, I'm not sure how their process works, but one thing I'm sure of is it's happening, and Americans are just not pushing back, not fighting back. Obviously, it has a lot to do with the fact that, I mean, World War I saw a draft. So it wasn't only alphas volunteering to go fight in these wars. American men were drafted. So it wasn't like today where the bravest among us voluntarily joined the military. Back then, there was a draft happening. And so I guess what I'm going to argue is that as World War I broke out, American men across the board were far more intelligent on average than the average American than across the board in 2021, right? You guys are wasting away. I'm not trying to chase you away from watching these videos, but we have to be honest. American males are wasting away today in front of computer screens at the hands of really bad diets, at the hand of drugs. Drinking is actually something that came with the English, and America is majority English. So drinking is something that came along with the original Pilgrims and Pioneers. Although, as I've mentioned before in my videos, A.G. Spalding, an American baseball pioneer, did away with drinking at the ballparks. He also got rid of gambling. He also got rid of playing games on Sundays. So there were Americans making an effort to clean up degenerate behavior. And I kind of am starting to reach a conclusion that baseball started to fail because A.G. Spalding passed away in 1915. So I think when he passed away, American baseball lost its father. American baseball has had a few, but a prominent father who was a true gatekeeper for the sport and a gatekeeper for Americans. Because A.G. Spalding believed that allowing gambling, allowing drinking into American ballparks at that time was victimizing the population. And so at somewhere along the line, this mindset was lost. And Americans fell into a culture of drinking, drugs, gluttony, right? Laziness. And again, there's so many things, there's so many moving parts to this. So today, again, 2021 is a result of everything that happened in the 1900s. Americans lost control of their government. Americans lost control of their country. Americans lost control of their children. Americans lost control of their schools. Americans lost control of their religion. And it was taken from you by 1% of the population. And in 2021, they've aggressively teamed up with 12% of the population. And again, I've rewatched a lot of stuff that I grew up watching, and Beverly Hills 90210 was one of the shows that my generation watched. And there is an episode when they're in college, there's this speaker that a group brings on campus, and the Jewish character is very upset because the speaker is apparently anti-Semitic. And one of the things that they talk about is an African man says there was a time when the Jewish population and black population had each other's backs. So he's talking about the 1960s. You could even stretch it back to 1947 when baseball was integrated. And so there's always been this connection between this 1% of the population residing on American soil and 12% of the population residing on American soil. So I'm going to take it back a little bit further back. Gone with the Wind, there's this documentary that I watched. I think at this point, it might be a year and a half ago. It aired on AMC because I think it was the anniversary of Gone with the Wind. And in the documentary, this had to have been made, maybe the 1940s, 1950s at the latest. Or when was Gone with the Wind? Sorry, I have so many timelines in my head. So whenever Gone with the Wind was released, a little bit afterwards, they made a documentary. And so there is the Black character, the girl, what did they call him back then? Was she a slave? The girl who isn't very intelligent, very dramatic. They had a problem with characterizing her or having her do something, and the person in charge of Gone with the Wind did state that there was a connection between the Jewish and the African community. And so this relationship, again, it has gone on through the hundreds, and we see the results of that relationship in 2021. And I don't want to dive too deep into it tonight, but I am going to talk about how, again, 1% of the population and 12% of the population have gotten together and have successfully managed to terrorize everyone else. It's pretty, I can't believe that Americans, true Americans, are still 60% of the population, yet a lot of you are bending the knee on your own soil. It blows my mind. I cannot believe that they've gotten you guys to do that. And again, my perspective on that specific topic is, if I was in Mexico right now as a Mexican, how would that be allowed to even start happening? Would Mexicans allow themselves to be taken over by foreigners? And indigenous people still live in the country. And from my understanding is everyone goes about their business. Nobody bothers each other. So there are indigenous people living in Mexico that don't speak Spanish, but no one bothers them and they don't bother other people. So to me, what's happening here in the United States, I compare these two, what's happening and what could potentially happen in Mexico. And I just don't think Mexicans would allow this. Maybe if it took place over 70 years, probably it could succeed there too. But okay, so on average, Americans have a higher IQ than Mexicans. And so the result in the differences in IQ is Mexicans are more violent than Americans, but Mexicans are more nationalist than Americans. So to me, that happy medium would be an IQ that delivers enough intelligence and then enough nationalism. Because if Americans had a little bit more nationalism, I don't think we would be close to what's happening right now in this country. It's so great to see some people pushing back, because why you would give up your country so easily, it just blows my mind. And that's part of the reason why I'm recording my thoughts, putting it out on the internet, putting it out on YouTube where it could be found fairly easily. Because YouTube acts as a search engine, right? And so it's shocking. It's just shocking to me. And so, again, for me, this stems from baseball. I grew up watching baseball since I was 2 years old. I fell in love with the sport. And maybe for me, baseball was my first love. Like Tom Brady says, football was his first love. And I mean, I'm not going to say that I have the kind of caliber that Tom Brady has to football, but I know that I have gifts, and I fought against them for a long time, and I finally just gave in. Given again, I don't feel despair, but I definitely feel a sense of urgency in what's going on in this country. I believe that Mexico and the United States can be natural friends. We don't have to be buddies like BFFs, but I think as neighboring countries, it is in everyone's best interest to have a good, um, polite relationship. And so it's in our best interest to ensure that the United States continues to stand as the founding fathers intended, not as what's happening as of the 1900s, because none of this is American. These things that are happening to you as an American, it's happening to you because you don't run your country. You don't run your government. You don't run these corporations. You don't even run professional sports. Um, so we've got to keep pushing back. Some people are doing that, and I'm so happy that it's happening. I'm so glad that it was tweeted out last week. So something that I've tweeted around, I haven't come out and said it directly, not out of fear, but just out of, I'm trying to lay down the foundation so that there are no surprises about my opinions. There are no surprises about my thoughts, where I stand. Um, so again, it's just, we've got to keep pushing back. Americans aren't violent, so I'm not saying there doesn't have to be a war, but Americans are still 60% of the population. Plus, you have a, a good amount of Latinos that fall into the boat. Latinos are natural conservatives. Obviously, as time is going by, abortion is being more accepted even among Mexicans who are Catholics. That's because the older generations are dying off. The younger generations are being influenced by what's going on in this country, by the people causing it to happen. So we've got to really keep pushing back. The more people start pushing back, the easier getting back to the American roots it's going to be. It's just a numbers thing at this point. We know that 70 million Americans know that the election was odd, right? Sketchy stuff. 70 million Americans pushing back is a serious number. There is no reason why you should be terrorized in your own neighborhoods at that rate. So I veered up pretty far. Let me come back to the original, my original point for tonight. And again, everything I talk about is connected. So that's why I go off on these tangents. So last Sunday, I promised that I would be referencing this workbook. It's not a book. It's too thin, although I believe it is part of a textbook. So this is like the workbook, the cliff notes of that textbook. I found this one for $1. I'm pretty happy. And I picked it up. Because psychology. So I have not had the chance to dive in too far into the subject of psychology. That's why this book is so great. It is, you can see, it's not too many pages. It's a good overview of everything I wanted to know about the topic. And I'm going to tell you how this ties into the opioid epidemic in a few minutes. Let me give you a quick tie-in. So, what's psychology? I mean, psychology is basically the polar opposite of religion, right? In religion, you confess your sins to God. In psychology, you are basically confessing your sins to this person who has been licensed, who isn't going to be someone conservative, who isn't likely to be someone who voted for Trump, right? And that's way more true in 2021. Now, psychology, like opioids, got its start in Germany. And there was a lot happening in Germany in the mid to late 1900s. I haven't had the chance to dive into that. Hopefully there are other people out there who are doing something similar to what I'm doing in terms of discovering what was happening in Germany at that point. What was happening in Germany before World War I and World War II broke out? Because I am starting to believe that what was happening in Germany at that time is the same thing that's happening in America today. Basically, the Germans weren't running their country anymore. There was a lot of strife being caused by non-Germans. So psychology stems from Germany. And I'm not going to be able to pronounce a lot of these names. I speak a couple languages, but I'm definitely rusty on that because I'm busy teaching my kid proper English and then he's picking up Spanish. So I don't have a lot of time to keep working on my stuff. But so psychology's founder is a German, Wilhelm Wundt. This goes back to 1879. And then we know that the Frankfurt School was established in Germany as well. And then they took off and they found a home in New York at Columbia. And when I've talked about the spread of Marxism on American campuses, that is the point of origin as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you cannot, I hope that people who are watching these things happen do more than just sit and complain about it or just sit and tweet about it. You've got to go one step beyond that and start mobilizing your concern. I mean, it could be as simple as pulling your kids out of public schools, simple as pulling them out of higher education. But you've got to, if you're going to complain about something, you've got to put some sort of action behind it. I'm not saying you've got to boycott, because a boycott means that when the company or the organization that you're boycotting, when they change their action, you're basically going to go back as if everything was hunky-dory, right, all along. So I'm not calling for boycotts. I'm calling for you've got to move back or step away from organizations that aren't American. They just aren't. Hollywood's not American. Professional sports isn't American. Corporations aren't American. Coca-Cola was very much attached with Ty Cobb, the late 1800s. They were basically his first um, advertising partner, right? And we see what Coca-Cola has turned into today. I mean, I know Coca-Cola is a corporation that has several brands underneath it, but a lot of the stuff that they produce, you don't even need to be consuming. And that's one of the points that I'm going to be making with these opioids is that, again, a lot of what we're living through right now in 2021 are things that have happened to Americans. It's not Americans. The one vice that the original Americans brought with them is the drinking. So the English are drinkers, the Irish are drinkers. But Americans didn't bring with them psychology. Americans didn't bring cocaine with them. Americans didn't bring morphine with them. Americans didn't bring heroin with them. These are substances that were synthesized in Germany in the late 1800s, and then they were brought over by those people. And so we've got to start being more mindful of the things that we're being encouraged to do. So I covered, I think it's been 2 weeks now, I talked about in the gambling episode, I talked about gambling. So MLB isn't run by Americans. And the people who do run MLB have brought gambling back to the sport with a bang. They're going as far as bringing it on site. I believe Chicago made a big push to get gambling on site. The Washington Nationals, last time I took a look, were on the cusp of bringing gambling on site. The Dodgers under Stan Kasten are very much trying to bring gambling on site. And I mean, Stan Kasten and his crew have basically turned. You can't go to Dodger Stadium and be comfortable anymore. Fights break out. It stinks like pot. There are severely drunk people out there. So it's definitely a family-friendly atmosphere. So it makes sense that the next step for Stan Kasten to complete the degeneracy at what used to be Blue Heaven is to bring on-site gambling. And so, but again, Stan Kasten is not an American. Neither is Andrew Friedman. Neither is Farhan Zaidi. Neither is Gabe Kapler. Neither is, who are some other prominent ones? I'm going to do an episode on Boston. What happened with the NBA and specifically with the Boston Celtics, I believe it was engineered, but I believe there's more to it. So I'm going to do an episode on Boston. Maybe I'll do it as soon as next weekend. So Chaim Bloom isn't an American. And again, Boston is I want to dedicate an entire at least hour to Boston. Okay, so what does this have to do with opioids? So again, Americans weren't the ones who were synthesizing plants to come up with cocaine, heroin, morphine, obviously not fentanyl. And so now that, see, here's the irony with this opioid situation. So the American labor market is far less in manufacturing jobs, far less in industrial jobs, yet somehow Americans were being prescribed these opioid medications to treat pain, which is so, it's just, I mean, shouldn't it, the relationship be different or the inverse, given that, or directly correlated, meaning as manufacturing and industrial jobs dipped, so should have workplace injuries, therefore necessitating less need for these medications. And the relationship is the inverse. As Americans became more nerdy, addiction to these pain medications increased. And so it's a really odd relationship, but it shows you that there are many ways these groups are purposely trying to destroy the American. Um, it is horrendous what's happening. I'm sorry. How can you not? If you're if you've read, if you go on the CDC website and you look up the opioid epidemic, and after reading through the information that they have, if you're not angry at what's happening to your fellow countrymen, then you're probably a Marxist. Because myself, I definitely have a strong reaction to all the information that I know about the opioid epidemic and how it unraveled. Because so in the 60s, again, this opioid stuff started being tracked by the medical community in 1999. In the 60s, so the drug of choice in the 80s was cocaine, right? And then in the 60s, the drug of choice was heroin. And the medical community bases a lot of its research based on what they're seeing in the emergency departments of hospitals. So in 2000, I believe it's 2001 through 2004, there was an increase in car accidents. Now, these car accidents that were landing in the ER were drug induced. And what they found was that a lot of these people had heroin in their system. But it took them a little bit longer to make the connection between the opioids and the heroin, because they were going off of the information from the 1960s when heroin was the drug of choice. So in the 1960s, people were given opioids. Now, obviously, the opioids of the 1960s were nowhere near as strong as the opioids that were being prescribed in the 90s and 2000s. But nonetheless, people were being weaned off of heroin with opioids. So in about 2001 through 2004, the medical community made the assumption that the same cycle was happening again. So they were being given opioids again. And then finally they realized, no, the opioids are leading to heroin because people are hooked and they can't get off them. So they couldn't get their prescriptions filled anymore. I think some of you, anybody who has followed the opioid epidemic, you may have heard that it's been so bad that people have been hurting their animals, taking them to their vet, getting a prescription for pain, and then these people are so hooked on drugs that they hurt their pets so they can get the medication for themselves. That's how dire this situation got in some parts of the country. And it's your fellow countrymen are being attacked on every imaginable front. So I am going to do a segment in the future on fertility, but I want to give you some information just as an overview. Um, so have you heard that American fertility is down? Now, do I believe that everyone needs to have children? No, no, I don't. But right now, Americans do need to figure out what to do about their fertility rates. But here's the issue: you need to have more babies, right? But your guys are in such horrible shape. If a dude is overweight, it impacts the quality of his sperm. If a dude is sitting in front of a computer all day long, it impacts the quality of his sperm. So, negative fertility factors include smoking, alcohol, toxins, body weight, and stress. Gluttony, right, is going to impact it. And what is the one about being lazy? Hang on, give me 1 second. I cannot think of it right now for some reason, but just being lazy, right? You're being lazy, it impacts the quality of your sperm. Bad quality sperm leads to higher chances of quality children, or the quality of your children is going to be lower if we're using bad quality sperm. These are just facts, okay? You don't have to be a scientist to reach that conclusion. Bad sperm leads to questionable quality kids. Why are kids sicker today? Why is there an epidemic of diabetes among children? Why is there an epidemic of obesity among children? Why is there an epidemic of cholesterol rates, high cholesterol rates among children? It's because the welfare state has encouraged laziness, has allowed lower quality genes to prevail over the better quality genes. These are just facts. I'm not sure if that's Darwinism exactly, but we are producing less quality people. These are just facts, okay? I mean, why is IQ falling? Because we're not producing quality children anymore. And that's why, in my case, my favorite baseball players, I realized something. I know, so there's a lot of stupidity happening in MLB right now. And I will talk about these things once I go morning and daily. I looked up when is no titles Derek Jeter being inducted officially, and I believe it's in July, and I believe it's a Sunday. And so I don't want to promote that. So I'm thinking of doing Hall of Fame week the Monday after, just because I don't want to promote that, and I don't want to give it any attention because, again, my opinion of Derek Jeter is if he had been on any other team, he would have been a nobody. He won no titles, no batting titles. On top of that, he struck out a lot. So I understand that Derek Jeter is some people's favorite player. He boded well. He boded well for specific demographics, and I'm not saying that out there, including the media, you can't have your favorite baseball players, but not every baseball player is Hall of Fame caliber. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to do a solid week, solid 7 days of just pounding that. And I'm not going to apologize. And So several Astro players that had the Marxist MLB media behind them obviously aren't going to get in the Hall of Fame now because of their cheating. And so now it turns out that several pitchers aren't going to get into the Hall of Fame either because they have been doctoring the ball. And I'm going to pound that because Garrett Cole, I remember when he was with the Pirates, he sucked. Garrett Cole is just a cheater bot. Who else was, I believe Scherzer was mentioned. So I'm referring to the LA Times article that came out, I believe, during spring training, right? The Angels organization had a dude selling stuff to the visiting team. I apologize to Scherzer if he wasn't mentioned in that article, but I believe Scherzer's name was in the LA Times article. And so I'm personally okay with, given what's happening in MLB. So if you visited my Twitter, you know that I've got the top 20 stats, top 20 players in categories that matter posted. And so I don't expect any MLB players to crack those lists anymore, given what's happening. But as far as I'm concerned, Zach Greinke, Madison Bumgarner have already earned their place in the Hall of Fame. And so I came on this tangent because I actually wanted to. So DJ LeMahieu is being impacted by the change in the ball. Again, we don't know what Steinbrenner Yankees are telling DJ LeMahieu to do when he's up at bat. But he's definitely being impacted by the ball. I believe that some of his contact with the ball last year would have found its way over the heads of the infielders. But because the ball has been changed, the ball is finding infielders, therefore he's grounding out often. So I hope DJ LeMahieu figures it out. But the other point that I wanted to make was, from the baseball stuff that I know that I found on him, he is somebody who has dedicated himself to playing the sport. And it's very impressive that he is so self-motivated, and he puts in the time. Now, he doesn't put in the time the way engineered bots have to put in the time, meaning, from my understanding, is DJ LeMahieu has spent the last several years practicing off the tee, not going to these ranches that engineer baseball players. I believe DJ LeMahieu was born to play baseball. I understand that he has gone to these organizations that do the whole analytics technology thing, but I believe it didn't happen. It happened several years into his career, as opposed to launching his career from there. So that's a huge difference. Now, again, DJ LeMahieu is a new father, and I realized that it must be difficult to be an everyday player and a new father, as opposed to being a pitcher and a new father. So hopefully DJ LeMahieu hang in there. Hang in there, and hopefully you and your wife will continue to expand your family, because I think it would be so awesome to see what a couple of your sons would look like and be like, and just you have the opportunity to guide them. So I think it would be outstanding. But again, it's I realized that being an everyday player is probably not conducive to being a father. It must be difficult. So hopefully he hangs in there. So so um I jumped into the fertility stuff because the opioids directly impact fertility. So once you are an or you've damaged the quality of your sperm by about, I wrote down the percentage. Um, well, let's put it this way. When a guy hits 35, there's DNA damaged. And then after 40, that damage just continues to increase. So you've got to be careful. Because women, we dry out. Our fertility takes a plunge at 25. And so even though women experience lower quality eggs sooner, men, you also, your fertility takes a hit as you age too. Okay, so let's get back to the opioid stuff. So again, today it was just about setting up that Americans are being attacked on several fronts. The opioid thing is just one more thing. For example, so Hollywood and entertainment, right? When Bing Crosby was around, when you know Clark Gable, I can't remember a lot of those guys' names, but you know the dude from It's a Wonderful Life. When those actors were around, they were patriotic, right? They were all about America. They respected the country. The actors that are being recruited today are not American, right? You basically, white and Hollywood don't mix anymore. But, you know, so these comedy movies, right? Your Adam Sandler movies, your Seth Rogen movies, your, what's another dopey dude that makes these raunchy comedies, right? Not Americans. Why are these actors? Sarah Silverman's another one, raunchy. She's not an American. So why are these people willing to put such raunch in front of you and hoping that you'll watch? It's because they're not Americans. They are participating in the destruction of Americans, and it's on all fronts. Something else I realized with MLB, they are desperately trying to normalize degenerate behavior by recruiting players. And I've already covered some of this stuff. Players who wear glasses, they're trying to normalize glasses. They just celebrated Lou Gehrig. Well, Lou Gehrig passed away because he was sick at the age of 37. So he had defective genes, but MLB wants to celebrate him. So they're trying to normalize poor health, from your eyesight to your genes. They are trying to normalize thugs. They keep putting these thugs in situations to turn them into heroes, to get you to worship them. And obviously, I'm not sure if it started with Kobe. I mean, we know Magic Johnson cheated on his wife and in the process contracted HIV. So, but I don't think Magic Johnson, even in LA, I don't remember my guy friends talking about Magic Johnson a lot because they talked about Michael Jordan. And let's face it, head to head, I mean, you are in denial if you would pick Magic Johnson over Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan, you know, in The Last Dance, right, we heard that Michael Jordan told his trainer that he wanted a workout routine that would allow him to smoke and drink. And, in a weird way, I respect that, because Jordan wasn't trying to influence kids to smoke and gamble. He was doing it, but it's not the way in MLB today or the NBA or the NFL where it's in your face, right? I personally didn't know what Michael Jordan was doing off the court. Again, my guy friends talked about Michael Jordan, the basketball player. And Michael Jordan, the spokesperson. His commercials were definitely fun. Everyone wanted to be like Mike. Okay, but again, I keep going off on these tangents because everything's connected to each other. So the MLB is intent in normalizing degenerate behavior as well as poor health. They're normalizing glasses, and I can tell you that I didn't grow up in the era of computers. That's why my eyesight is still color. But I did recently have an experience where I found out what's happening with kids' eyes. And so, again, this computer stuff, it's not American. Social media, it's not American. It was built on American soil, but this stuff was not generated by Americans. Americans went 300 years doing outdoor stuff, right? Even Jefferson spoke out about manufacturing plants. He wasn't a fan. He wanted Americans to stay outside because it was the healthiest way to take care of ourselves. And I'm going to talk about the fitness industry is a scam. And it is, believe me, when I realized that, it's shocking. And I'm going to bring into it a personal experience. So I've had two episodes with weight, obviously after pregnancy and then more recently. And after I had my kid, I lost the weight the hard way. I did it by going to the gym. Now, I did lose it. It took me a year and a half going to the gym, and I enjoyed going to the gym. I'm all about that natural high, right? It's pretty awesome. And but something that I've been concerned about for several years is what happens as I'm aging. And as a woman, we age differently than men, right? That's why men can never become women and women can never become men. We age differently. Men's blood thickens as they age, whereas women's blood thins. Also, our veins, women's veins shrink, right? There are just, sorry, not participating in the lies is one of the things I believe in. And so I can I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm not sure if I'm going to go, when I bring my personal stuff into it, I'm not sure if I want to do it on YouTube or if I want to do it on Locals, or one of those other subscription platforms, just because I want people who actually are genuinely interested to hear it, not just because they ran into it. So, so the second time, so people talk about, to lose weight, you got to cut calories. And I can tell you that never sunk in for me. I didn't understand. And so I had to make some lifestyle changes. And I can tell you that it didn't involve exercising. And I've had pretty awesome results. And if I knew that, I'm going to say post baby, stuff would have been a lot easier. And so I don't regret going to the gym. It was good for me. I learned a lot. I had a really good, he wasn't a trainer, but he led the classes and he was awesome. And I took his classes, I believe 5 days a week. And, so what I was worried about is what happens as I'm aging. And since women, we lose bone density, I have to be realistic about these things, right? What happens the day that you can no longer do a push-up? What happens the day that you cannot lift weights? How do you prevent gaining weight when you've been losing it by exercising? What happens if you can't exercise anymore? Or what happens when you just you really don't have the time? And so I do bring in a lot of my experiences. For example, I tweeted about, I was offered the swine flu vaccine when that was going around and I turned it down. And that's one of the reasons why I hope that my favorite baseball players were careful with the vaccine right now. I don't care how healthy you are. I don't care how young you are. I don't care that you're getting the best medical treatment. When they start messing with your DNA, you got to be careful with stuff. So it impacts the young as much. I mean, maybe not as much, but it can still impact you. So I hope you guys are thinking things through and making sure the choice. So just be careful, especially if you don't have any sons yet. But again, another tangent, but it all comes back to Americans are being targeted for destruction. The opioids is just one more thing. And I personally believe that once you're an addict, you're always an addict. So I don't believe that rehab works. So once you allow yourself to fall into this hole, or you allow your children to fall into this hole, I'm not sure how much can be done to help you or them. But what I do know is that we shouldn't replicate your or theirs genes. At that point, the product, the life that you can produce is questionable. And so, again, this might be Darwinist, but I also think that we have to be realistic about these things and about the kind of future that we need to start procuring, because the best America that was around before it got taken over by 1% of the culture teamed up with 12% of the culture. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about the people encouraging you to smoke pot. I mean, I know libertarians have become useful idiots. I mean, you guys are just, you shouldn't reproduce, basically, is what I'm getting at. I question your intelligence if you think that recreational drugs are the way to go. You are definitely what Cassandra Fairbanks called a net negative on society, and we should all be working to reduce the net negative to society. And it starts with figuring out how to keep people away from these opioids, keep people away from drugs. The drinking stuff, again, it came from England, so it's kind of in your blood to drink. I mean, there's not that much we can do about that, but the smoking stuff, I believe that there is an attempt to Africanize America, and I believe the model that they want to use is the Rust culture, right? Bob Marley. Now, I believe that they have an IQ of 61. So you've got to really push back on this. They're trying to lower your IQ that far down. At that point, it's not a functioning society anymore. Jamaica. It's Jamaica. They're trying to bring in Jamaica's culture, which has a severely low IQ. Okay, so tomorrow I'll start going over some stats. I wanted to give you an overview. I wanted the opportunity to veer off in different directions, but everything's tied together. I'm trying to spark people who have been tiptoeing around this stuff or thinking about this stuff. I know a lot of what's happening to me right now is that movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm drug free. I'm medication free too. But a lot of stuff that I encountered or I remember watching or I heard when I was in school, I'm drawing on all of those things. So I had a very interesting college experience for several reasons, and I'm not sure how deep I am. I'm going to go into it on YouTube just because at that point it's personal. I mean, you're basically really getting to know me on a different level, and I'm not sure how comfortable I am yet going that far down. But my college experience, I keep pulling stuff from that because, okay, so there's 10 million more millennials than there are Gen Xers. And I feel like what they did to millennials, they tried to do Gen X, but either we were too aloof or too, I mean, we're really in between the new and the old, right? And so now again, but for me, I'm first generation American, so I've got no guilt that second, third, fourth, fifth generation Americans feel. So that's another reason why I'm not 100% sure why none of that stuck for me, because there was definitely an attempt. Beverly Hills 90210 had some seriously there's stuff in that show that I definitely didn't notice growing up. The way millennials cling to this woke culture stuff and this guilt, they tried that on X, and I some of the stuff. So I watched like the first few episodes of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We were very young when that show ran. And we used to watch it because we only had 4 channels to watch at that time. And then it was what was on, and Will Smith did have good comedic timing. So I watched the first few episodes of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air over a year ago now. And the amount of Black power in that show is shocking. I didn't realize how much they attempted to really drive in Black power. And I honestly don't know how I missed it. But okay, so that's going to be something for another day. And I feel like some of those insights, some people are going to try to use not in the way that I'm hoping people will use them, as opposed to using it to help us. I believe they're going to try to use it to keep stagnating us. So again, I'm not sure how deep I'm going to go into some of this stuff on YouTube. But okay, so tomorrow I'll bring in the stats on the opioid stuff. I encourage you guys to read the literature that's on the CDC website, specifically on opioids. And just watch your stuff. Watch your kids. I know that when they're 18, they're adults. They're legally free to do what they will, but you never stop being their parent. You gotta really pay attention to your kids. But I'll make one more point before I start truly wrapping up, which I'm trying to do now. But I don't understand parents who take their kids to Jay-Z concerts. I don't understand, unless you're African, I get it then. But if you're American, I don't understand why you would take your kids to a Jay-Z concert. I don't understand why you would let your kids watch the Kardashians. I don't understand why you put them in front of the TV set on Nickelodeon. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. I know that once your kids start entering the teenage years, they really become independent, and there's not that much you can do at that point. But the point is to develop a relationship to where you can have influence over them, and they want it, they accept it, and they want you to set barriers, and they want you to be their parent. And so but okay, so thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you if you catch the replay, I really appreciate it. This weekend I'm here, and I might be here over the weekends through the rest of June. I'm just trying to figure out logistics. I'm trying to figure out, I'm balancing a couple things, and so I'm just trying to, again, spark people who have the time to carry the torch for everybody, but not with centralization and not with the hopes of becoming some sort of elected dictator. So we'll see how everything turns out. So hopefully you guys will have a good night. I will be here tomorrow again, 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you again. See you soon.